Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move the reasoned amendment that stands in the name of His Majesty's loyal opposition. This side of the House stands against Labour's £35 billion Chagos surrender deal. Everything about this surrender deal is wrong, from the way it was negotiated behind closed doors within weeks of Labour coming to power, to the betrayal. I would happily give way to the honourable gentleman.
Behind closed doors, could you please publish the previous government's negotiation position, including the cost that they were looking to do on this deal?
The honourable member, let me just be clear, the honourable member, and I was not a member of the last government, will know perfectly well that no one on these benches has any authority to publish what are classified papers from previous governments. He might laugh about that, but I think that side of the House might want to apologise to Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton in the other House, who actually stopped the deal, who's been grossly misrepresented this afternoon in this debate. He really has. And Madam Deputy Speaker, in a minute, no, I'll come back in a minute, please. And on top of this, Madam Deputy Speaker, in terms of what else is wrong with this surrender deal, is the fundamental betrayal of the British Chagossian community, whose rights have been ignored and neglected. And I do want to pay tribute to them, Madam Deputy Speaker. They have joined us today. They are sitting in the gallery, and this, if I remember rightly, is almost the fifth or sixth time that they've joined us to show how strongly they feel about this particular deal, because this is undermining the defence and the security interests of this country. It also brings risk to the destruction of the unique marine environment and a failure to protect the future of the marine protected area. From refusing to grant this House a meaningful debate and vote on the treaty when it came, to the scenes in the Mauritius National Assembly, and I hope Labour MPs watched the debates in the Mauritius National Assembly, of the Prime Minister gloating of how easy it was to secure concession after concession from the Labour government, and also from the deceit, misinformation and gaslighting towards the British people, through to the £35 billion cost to hard-working British taxpayers, which will be used to fund tax cuts in Mauritius, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will give way.
Foreign Secretary for giving way. Does she agree with me that when the Minister described this deal as an investment, would it be helpful to educate him that a freehold is an investment and a lease is a liability?
And on top of that, there is this whole issue about the liabilities and the cost of all of that and everything else that goes with it. But he makes a fundamental and important point. I will give way to my honourable friend.
And we talk about the cost of this. Well, actually, the Taxpayers Alliance have actually concerns about the amounts that we're calculating, because all of this will be dependent on inflation. And this does not, the calculations take into market values. So actually, the £35 billion that the Government Actuary Department says would actually be more like £47 billion.
And of course, we do know that this government does not like speaking about inflation for all the macroeconomic reasons that we know, because inflation under this government continues to rise, which speaks volumes about their handling of the economy. But this deal is so bad for Britain. It has left our country humiliated and weaker on the world stage. And now our friends and enemies alike are laughing at the UK and Labour's epic diplomatic failure to stand up for our national interests. I will give way.
That this is an international problem for the UK, but does she not agree that the Americans, the Canadians, the New Zealanders, the Australians, the Indians, and even the Pope supports this deal, and it's really important that our Five Eyes security partners are behind us?
To the honourable gentleman, that having led Five Eyes for our country and very proudly have done so, I think it is a great matter of concern that this deal has actually been backed by Iran, China and Russia. And I'd say to the honourable gentleman that that is exactly why this is a bad deal for our country. It is correct, actually, and I can point him to the references where those countries have spoken in favour of this deal. I will give way.
And I thank her for giving way. I'm going to give the right honourable lady another opportunity to confirm that she agrees with our Five Eyes allies that this is a good deal. Those are the people who back this deal.
Five allies partners at the weekend, and I can tell you now, they are not paying for this deal, and they are not gloating about this as well. They see this very much as a failure of this government, and he can go and justify that to his constituents. Now, I know the minister, and if I may, I will shortly. If I may, in all respect to the Minister, first of all, I'd like to congratulate him on his new post and the promotion, and also to welcome him to this wider discussion. And I know he's tried his best to sell the surrender deal to the House, but the choices made by his Prime Minister and the former Foreign Secretary, who obviously is no longer in post, the Attorney General and Labour ministers will leave Britain weaker and poorer, humiliated into giving away sovereignty of our British territory and paying a fortune, 35 billion, to lease it back. The point has already been made a number of times. Lease back a base that we already own. And while Labour have spent months trying to hide the details of their Chagos surrender deal and the scale of the financial cover-up, it's been this party holding Labour to account constantly for exposing their shameful decision and the action. I will give way to the honourable gentleman who's been waiting patiently at the back.
Honourable member for giving way. And just to come back on her point, firstly about security, then I must have misread our US colleagues when, in the Department of Defence, they told the members of the Defence Select Committee, some of whom have sat behind you and heard the same words, that they didn't understand your consternation with this deal. But let's assume that you haven't put that in the incorrect way. If there wasn't a problem, could she please explain why your party started the negotiations?
Order, Foreign Secretary. Shadow Foreign Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For the benefit of this House and for everyone, just to give absolute clarity again, it was the last Conservative Foreign Secretary that ended all discussions on this. And I say it again, in all respect to Lord Cameron... No. Sit down. In all respect to Lord Cameron, I think the party opposite should apologise for the gross misrepresentation that has taken place there. And I have to say, Speaking of Foreign Secretaries, I think it's a real shame that the new Foreign Secretary is not here today to speak on this bill, because she could have come in, reviewed the details, got the slide rule out. I think the slide rule will be quite a good tool, basically, in this case, and effectively... we signed the treaty. I've just heard the treaty was signed without the treaty even coming to this House for a debate and a discussion and a vote.
Where is she?
Not. The Foreign Secretary could have come to the House to review this and even scrap the deal and save the British taxpayer billions of pounds. But like her predecessor, she's just left it to junior ministers to defend. I will give way one more time to this gentleman.
Was in the deal that the previous Foreign Minister was negotiating, and these points of sovereignty and everything else were conceded by her party.
I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Thank you very much, Shadow Minister, for giving way. Can you tell me why the US and the Five Eyes backed this deal?
It's not gone on the record to actually say that they have, and I've already made it quite clear why it's not in our interest. Madam Deputy Speaker, it tells us something about Labour's priorities that within days of coming to office, the Prime Minister met with the then Prime Minister of Mauritius to commit to the surrender deal within days of coming into office, encouraged by the Prime Minister's obsession with left-wing activism and distorted views of international law, and advised by one of the Prime Minister's best friends and supporters, one could even say cheerleader. Mauritius knew they were onto a winner, negotiating with this naive, foolish and Britain-hating Labour government. And true to form, instead of standing up for Britain's interests, Labour rushed to accept the views of an advisory opinion of a foreign court that few had heard of. They swiftly agreed to Britain's surrender of sovereignty. I will give way.
I'll thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Is my honourable friend aware of any of our allies who think that the leasehold deal that we have, which is insecure and expensive, is actually better than the freehold sovereignty and security that we had before?
Very good point, and I've not heard Five Eyes allies actually speak about the fact that that is a good way of effectively securing anything that's in any national interest whatsoever. The concept of leasehold is completely wrong. I will give way.
Very grateful to my right honourable friend. Clearly, the party opposite isn't going to take any lessons from us, but I wonder whether they're listening. Well, I wonder whether they're listening to one of their own, and that is Lord West of Spithead, who, of course, famously was Security Minister under the last Labour administration, First Sea Lord and Chief of Naval Staff. He knows a thing or two. And he has said very clearly that, in his expert opinion, this deal is irresponsible and that it will damage our strategic interests. Who are we to believe? The party opposite or my old boss, Lord West?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. But there is something fundamental here about the negotiations, and I think the Minister actually alluded to this earlier on, is that effectively, they were just listening to lefty lawyers, listening to advisory judgments, and effectively acting because they were frightened that their left-wing lawyer friends would pursue even more legal lawfare against us. And the Minister for Overseas Territories told the Foreign Affairs Committee that our view is that without this deal, it was inevitable that Mauritius would pursue and secure a legally binding judgment against the UK. Indeed, legally binding provisional measures could have been secured within weeks, but they have never, not once detailed, what the legal threat is, other than hiding behind spurious aspects of international law. And I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a defeatist attitude. This is an absolute defeatist attitude that Labour have taken, because Britain is Europe's leading defence power. In Europe, a pillar of NATO, we're a P5 member of the UN Security Council with the right to veto. We are not bound by advisory judgments pursued by Mauritius at the ICJ, which included, by the way, a judge who is a member of the Chinese Communist Party. But by being vocal in conceding defeat and unwilling to defend Britain from a barrage of lawfare, Labour have left Britain's standing and the world stage plummet, and their decisions will have serious consequences for us. It really will. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we all know, let's just talk about the money. We all know this Labour government is a big spender when it comes to splashing about taxpayers' money. And the costs of Labour's surrender treaty are astronomical, £34.7 billion. A figure which, by the way, we had to drag out of the government's actuary department because Labour ministers repeatedly refused to disclose the cash payments when asked, and because payments are linked to inflation, which my honourable friend has pointed to. Guess what? The cash cost could be even higher. That's higher taxes for our constituents. That's nothing to cry about on the Labour benches. I will give way.
Way. She comes here claiming that this deal is, astronomical costs and all of that, but what she won't put on record is how much the deal that they were negotiating cost. And she can say all she wants, that was a matter for the public record, but she needs to be clear with the British public.
I will be absolutely crystal clear, for the benefit of this House and for Hansard as well, is that there was no deal whatsoever. And the party opposite can put out as much fake news as they wish. They can carry on crowing on and pretending that there was a deal. There was no deal. It was the last Conservative Foreign Secretary that stopped any negotiations and discussions, and they were stopped. Lord Cameron himself has said that. So on that basis alone, I think they should all apologise. All apologise. I'm going to make progress. All apologise to Lord Cameron, and perhaps even correct the record. I will give way.
I'm most grateful to my right honourable friend. Does it not speak volumes about the real nature of this government that here we are facing a fiscal and potentially a financial crisis in the government's finances? They want more money spent on health. They want more money spent on benefits, because that's what they're doing. But this is their priority, listening to lefty lawyers pontificating about decolonisation and committing billions of pounds of long-term liabilities to give away something and lease back that we already own. Doesn't they say something about the extraordinary myopic preoccupations of this government, which, of course, we told the Foreign Office to get lost?
My honourable friend is absolutely right on this. He really is. And it speaks volumes about the priorities of this current government, the Labour government. Socialist to its core, clearly, in terms of the way in which it likes spending public money, but also the type of priorities that it effectively focuses on. And come November, when the Chancellor has her budget, there's no point crowing to the past and blaming other people and other countries and international forces and factors. This is a fiscal mess made by this Labour government with this utterly scandalous and appalling, reckless financial giveaway. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to her for giving way, and the Minister from the dispatch box challenged this side, the Shadow Chancellor, about his position on net present value.
The reason net present value has never been used in this place is because it's unprecedented. It's used for commercial deals that government use and standardised for that alone, not for international agreements when it comes to sovereignty. So does she agree with me this party will not change net present value because it has its place commercially, not when dealing and giving away sovereignty?
My friend is absolutely right, and it is absolutely shameful. I come back to the fundamental principle that this House will have to consider is that at a time when hard-pressed British taxpayers are struggling and there are significant tax rises and the tax burden is going up on the public, the government will have to have a good, hard look at itself and justify to their own constituents how they can justify this appalling cost. I will give way.
My honourable friend made an excellent point earlier about the underlying socialism within this agreement. The initial agreement, no, let me just clarify, because the initial agreement from May very clearly says it is about apologising for the decolonization of Mauritius. It is about the regrettable legacy. Everything is laid out for apologizing for our British history and our heritage and not being proud of protecting our sovereignty, protecting the realm, protecting our security, and making sure that we are not saying we're going to apologize and pay out because we feel bad about everything that we've done. That is the difference between the parties and the benches, and that is why we are taking such objection to this bill.
Well, I thank my honourable friend. And if I may just gently say to some of the members opposite, laughing and sneering at a fellow member of this House when she's making a very valid point, I think is simply very disrespectful. But I think it says a great deal. The honourable member can laugh as much as he wants. In the eyes of the British public, they see the benches opposite as a party that doesn't stand up for Britain, a Labour-hating, a Labour Party that doesn't stand up for Britain and British values, and that is not something to be laughed at or sneered about. I will give way.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. Just to settle this whole argument about net present value, the reason why you simply cannot use it for a long-term treaty obligation is because it has to make a really heavy estimation of what will happen socially and economically in that area. You can just about use some of that in the UK, where a government controls certain aspects. It does not control after this treaty is signed. And that is why it's been recommended that it not use for long-term effects when it's not within the UK, and that's why the actuarial department said you go for the total amount, not for this net present value.
Yeah. My right honourable friend's absolutely correct on this. I will give way to my colleague.
I thank the my right honourable friend for giving way. She talked about how she was concerned about the cost of this deal, but does she share my concern about the way in which this deal was negotiated, where the Prime Minister of Mauritius has outlined that only the Prime Minister of our respective countries were in the room and officials were asked to leave the room. So there are no records of what was discussed. Does she think that this is a way in which a responsible democratic government should show transparency when negotiating on the international stage?
Oh, well, my honourable friend is absolutely right on this, and at the heart of this is transparency. Transparency around negotiations and also transparency around fiscal negotiations. I will give way, of course I will give way.
The honourable lady for giving way. She talks about transparency, but once again we have not heard a word from her about what her government's position would have been. There's been no transparency at all. They went through 11 rounds of negotiations. If she didn't believe a deal was possible, surely they should have stopped after at least 2 or 3. She knew a deal was vital to UK security interests, and they couldn't conclude it.
Indeed.
I think the honourable member who was laughing and sneering at fellow colleagues earlier on should have listened to what I said earlier on. That is simply not acceptable. That really isn't. There was no deal done. Again, I will restate it for the House. There was no deal. No deal done whatsoever. There was no. I will not give way. I will not give way. I think. Look, the House should note, and I think we've heard certainly from this side of the House, that we have rarely seen this methodology that the government is now hiding behind used for any other spending announcements before. And I will give. I think the minister, perhaps when he winds up, would like to perhaps give a commitment to present all spending decisions regarding this methodology in the future, or explain to us why they've singled out this large and embarrassing level of expenditure to be formulated in this particular way. It is down to the fact that they're covering up a colossal cost. I will give way.
All right, honourable friend. Point's been made over and over again in the course of this discussion that we're giving away something that we didn't have to give away. We're renting it back, and the British taxpayer is paying for it. Now, last week, I asked the Leader of the House how much this was going to cost. And she said, alongside legislation, we publish all the necessary documents, including the costings, which we have been transparent about. I have to say, I regard the right honourable gentleman as a friend, but to say the least, his figures have been opaque. Let me just ask one very simple question that my right honourable friend might know the answer to. How much is the United States contributing towards this deal?
Well, I have to thank my right honourable friend for his contribution, and also for the way in which he has been pursuing this line of question in the chamber with other government ministers. He is absolutely correct, and of course what we do know is that the United States of America is not contributing to the cost of this. This is solely the cost of the British taxpayer. The gentleman, operational costs of the base are different. That is not in this treaty, and it's not in this bill. And the bill before us today represents a series of measures, not the treaty in its entirety, which, Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite, the government, blocked this House from voting on during the 21-day CRAG process. Last week, when asked at oral questions why we were not getting a vote on the costs, the then Foreign Secretary, now Deputy Prime Minister, proclaimed that there would be a vote. But this is not a motion that the government has seen fit, by the way, to put forward. And as the explanatory notes to the bill confirm, it will not authorise expenditure. We on these benches do not think this is acceptable. So we will table amendments to the bill to hold the Deputy Prime Minister to his word and ensure that this House has a rightful say over these payments to Mauritius. And let us be clear, unless there's a direct vote on the costs, Labour would have cheated Parliament and Britain out of having a say on the financial implications of the $35 billion of expenditure that British taxpayers are being forced to pay to a foreign government. That means higher taxes for British taxpayers and less spending for Britain, for British people, across all constituencies around the country, all to shamefully fund tax cuts, debt reduction and new investment in Mauritius. Not in our country, but in Mauritius. I'll gladly give way to any minister on the front bench or even on the back benches there, any member, if they want to explain why they think that is acceptable, A, to deny Parliament a vote on the £35 billion of expenditure, and why that money should be given to a foreign government and not invested in this country. And if they need time to check with Rachel from Accounts or Lord Hermer about this point as well, I'm sure they can do so between now and the end of this debate. But look, Labour giving away British taxpayers' money to a foreign government for a land we already own is reckless and irresponsible. I will give way, of course.
Thank you, Madam Friend. She's making a great speech and making the point that this is reckless giving away of British money. And unlike many of the other things we've had to sit and watch Labour do, like take winter fuel allowance off old people, heavily tax charities and hospices and others, this is something that cannot be undone. Once this money is given away to this foreign country, there is nothing that any future government can do to claim it easily back.
My friend is absolutely right. And look, at the end of the day, the real judge of this will be the British people. How they view this deal. The fact, no, I'm answering the Honourable Lady. The real judge will be the British people. And how they view the fact that it's the Labour government giving away $35 billion to a foreign government. That's money that could be spent in this country, and simply, I'm going to make progress now, and I've taken plenty of interventions from there, and that is simply not acceptable at all. Now, the Minister did touch on aspects around the base at Diego Garcia, which clearly is one of the most important military assets in the world, and it enables us and our US allies to have significant global reach. But this treaty does undermine this position, and the bill has no measure to mitigate these effects. The surrender of sovereignty means that Britain is a rule taker of laws and rules and the commands of Mauritius, which acts as a I've given way plenty of times to the honourable gentleman, which acts as a restriction and impediment on base operations. For example, we do know that Mauritius has signed up to the Pendelaba Treaty, banning the stationing and storage of nuclear weapons, and yet no minister has thus far been able to provide a definitive answer when questioned on how this may impact on our security and defence once the UK is no longer sovereign, or able to exercise sovereign rights over the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia. Under the terms of the treaty, we're also bound to notify Mauritius of various activities relating to the use of the base, including notice of operations from the base that are taken against their countries and movements of vessels from our allies. But despite heavy questioning, at no point have ministers explained in detail how these notifications will work and who will have access to this information. I will, of course, give way.
With respect to yes, the Shadow Foreign Secretary is really coming to the nub of the matter. Because if this is about the future security of the world, including the United Kingdom, and we are arriving at a situation where the sovereign power is a signatory of an anti-nuclear treaty, which prohibits the stationing of nuclear weapons anywhere within the ambit of the countries who are signatories to that treaty, how is it that we could even use this base for our nuclear submarines?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and if I may say so, and this is why it was important, in my view, to also have a debate here on the floor of the House when the treaty came together, which we did not. It actually questions everything around the security, our ability to be as strong and secure as we need. And, you know, with our sovereignty over this base being surrendered, it comes as no surprise, I think, to all members of this House. Our enemies are now queuing up to, guess what? Make friends with Mauritius. Yep. Just days before the surrender treaty was signed, Russia agreed with Mauritius a new partnership agreement, which includes marine research. That means so-called marine research conducted by Russia could take place just a handful of miles away from our base. And as well as that partnership with Russia, Mauritius has been courted extensively by Iran and China for further partnerships in a range of other areas. But despite warnings, this inept Labour government has failed to act to safeguard our interests. I've given way to the honourable gentleman many times. I will give way one more time to the honourable gentleman.
Has she on the previous question of how much operational independence we really will have, can she comment on Article 4 of the agreement, which is entitled Mauritian Security Review, which requires us to consult Mauritius before any construction or emplacement of maritime installation or any proposal for development in the land territory of the Chagos Archipelago. And the Mauritius Security Review may be conducted and our permission to carry out those works is dependent upon the outcome of the Mauritius Security Review. We don't have operational independence given by this treaty. It then goes through the dispute process where there is no decisive way of deciding it unless there is agreement between the two Prime Ministers. This is a completely inadequate agreement.
Well, I think my honourable friend has summed this up completely. It is a completely inadequate process. The whole thing. There is no transparency, dispute resolution mechanisms. I mean, this stuff is just too messy when it comes to speaking about the defence and security of our country. And again, I come back to the treaty. This is exactly why this House should have had the ability to debate the treaty on the floor of the House and give it the scrutiny that is required. But I will say one thing. Let's hope that the Prime Minister and his lefty lawyers are not involved in the dispute resolution mechanisms, because Britain will only come out worse from this, because as we know, when Labour negotiates, Britain loses. Both in this House and at the press conference announcing the signing of the treaty, I have to say this, it was really quite interesting to hear the Prime Minister at the time say, I mean, he was almost gaslighting critics of the treaty by comparing them, that's us, to China, Russia, Iran, when he arrogantly declared his views and position during that press conference. And on the 4th and 11th of June in this House, he also went on to say that it has been opposed by our adversaries, Russia, China and Iran. But we do know that 6,000 miles away at their celebration party press conference in Mauritius, China was singled out for praise by the Mauritian government. Their press release, highlighted by that Deputy Prime Minister, Paul Berenger, noted that China's unwavering support played a crucial role in the international recognition of Mauritian sovereignty. And then a few days later, the Chinese ambassador issued them with a massive congratulations on securing the surrender of the Chagos Islands. And this summer, the Mauritian government published a press release saying that the President expressed gratitude for China's unwavering support for Mauritius' sovereignty claim over the Chagos Archipelago. Iran has also been supportive of the Mauritian claim of the Chagos Island, with their ambassadors saying earlier this year the Islamic Republic of Iran has always supported Mauritius's position regarding the Chagos issue. So Chagos belongs to the Mauritian people. We support its return and have made many efforts in the past towards that goal. And in the case of Russia, when meeting Putin, the former Mauritian President Vaipuri stated, "We appreciate the support of Russia in our claim for sovereignty on Chagos." So, Madam Deputy Speaker, ministers have been asked in parliamentary questions for the evidential basis of the Prime Minister's claims about the apparent opposition of those three countries that threaten our interests, but have not come forward with it. So when the Minister responds, can he finally explain the grounds behind the Prime Minister's malicious, almost spurious remarks, or apologise for those claims? Because all evidence shows, so far from opposing the surrender treaty, our enemies actually back it, which means Britain is weaker. I know the honourable gentleman is going to be speaking in the House. On the British Chagossians, Madam Deputy Speaker, as well as undermining our security and defence interests and ripping off British taxpayers, Labour have betrayed the British Chagossians. Now, all sides of the House have recognised and acknowledged that the Chagossian community have faced injustices and hardships, and their removal from the Chagos Islands is a source of great and profound regret. I want to pay tribute to the Chagossian community in Britain for their campaigning, and to our former colleague, the former Member of Parliament Crawley, Henry Smith, for the way he kept pursuing and raising this issue and fought in this House for their rights. As a result, we gave the community new rights in the Nationality and Borders Act in 2022, which, Madam Deputy Speaker, was voted against by the party opposite. I hope the Minister can give assurances that those rights will not be undermined by the citizenship measures in Clause 4 of this bill. But it is because of this pass, which is why it's so important that any decisions made over the future of the Chagos Islands are made with them in mind and also with their needs fully respected. 10 years ago, I know the Minister for Overseas Territories, then opposition spokesman, said the people of Chagos must be at the heart of decisions about their future. The UK government have a fundamental and moral responsibility towards the islanders that will not go away. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this treaty fails them. Now, I've met with the community many, many times, heard of their concerns and also of their frustrations, and I think everyone in this House will acknowledge their frustrations, but they do feel that they have been ignored throughout this process, and they feel that this treaty as well has no guarantees for them. There is a £40 million Chagossian trust fund that UK payers will capitalise, but the UK and the British Chagossians will have no control or say over how it will be used and what the control will be like of this fund by the government of Mauritius. I highlight this point because, of course, the Chagossians fundamentally know that and feel very strongly that they cannot trust the government of Mauritius. This bill and the treaty makes no provision for the British Chagossians to benefit from the trust funds or be involved in its governance, nor does it guarantee them any rights to visit the Chagos Island. These decisions will be controlled by Mauritius once sovereignty is surrendered. And those across the House who have spoken up for British Chagossians know of the fears that they have. And I feel, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is right today that I amplify those fears, or at least raise them in this House, because their voices have not been heard. Now is the time for them to be, for their voices to be heard and counted, and importantly, for their rights to be defended. Another damning indictment of this bill and this treaty is the way in which this whole bill and this treaty fails to safeguard the marine protected area. At 640,000 square kilometres, its unique biodiversity enables important marine research to be conducted. Now, in just the last few weeks, a study which included researchers from Exeter and Harrowatch universities and ZSL was published, noting that our results provide clear evidence for the value of the Chagos archipelago, which is very large, the MPA for protecting a diverse range of large and mobile marine species. And yet all we have heard thus far from the government is warm words about intentions to continue with an MPA. There have not been any details published. We do not know. Yes, I will give way.
On the conservation point, isn't it the case that actually we've already had this case tested in UNCLOS between 2010 and 2015, when they actually presided that we couldn't go ahead as British territory on a marine protection area because we hadn't consulted properly with Mauritius. At that point, they also determined that UNCLOS could not determine sovereignty because it is not under their basis. So not only have we found out about the sovereignty side, we also found out that we can't protect the islands from the environmental part. So what guarantees does she see in this treaty that we will have ecological protections in the area given the previous findings?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely correct in the way in which he has literally highlighted the insecurities and the serious challenges and also the matter of UNCLOS. He's absolutely right. We don't know, we do not know at this stage. It may be forthcoming, but today, at this particular stage, we do not know what current levels of protection will be provided and will continue. We do not know what levels of resource Mauritius will put into the MPA and what the UK will contribute as well. Yes, I will give way.
Making a very powerful case. The answer is none. Because Mauritius has no navy and it practically has no coast guard. So with what means is Mauritius going to defend a territory hundreds of kilometres away? The answer is it can't possibly do so.
Well, my friend has absolutely summed it up, and it's their also not just their inability to do so, they clearly won't be interested in this whole particular area. And I think it's important, just again for this House, to just reflect upon that point. After decades and years of investment and support in the MPA, this is now a major issue of jeopardy for them. So we do not know at this stage what the governance arrangements will be. And in fact, in the words of the Minister, Baroness Chapman, in response to questioning about this from my honourable friend, the member for Bognor Regis and Littlehampton, at the Environmental Audit Committee in April this year, the Minister went on to say it will belong to the government of Mauritius and they will make decisions about how they protect the seas around Chagos, the Chagos archipelago. You may want more detail than we have. We and the government of Mauritius want to see the marine protected area continue, but I don't know what the precise nature of it will be. But what we do know is that the Fisheries Minister of Mauritius, Dr. Bilal, is eyeing up the marine protected area to exploit it, boasting to his National Assembly on the 7th of February 2025 that he wants to issue fishing and trawler licences. He declares, what stops me tomorrow to say that I'm going to give fishing licences for any fishing trawler company or any fishing vessel to go to any part of Chagos? Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, this issue has also been raised extensively in the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House, with no minister being able to give any assurances. So if this bill passes and if this treaty is implemented, then the unique marine environment will be put at risk. Madam Deputy Speaker, there are two brief areas that I just want to touch on. Another part of this bill, in the Chagos Surrender Bill, and this should concern the House, and that is the Henry VIII clause is contained in this bill. That's clause 5, and it grants the government a free hand with little or no parliamentary scrutiny, decisions or authority to make any provision that appears to His Majesty to be appropriate as a result of this treaty. That could mean the government making further concessions to the government of Mauritius in the future, and with the treaty making provision for a joint commission with the UK and Mauritius. That could take place without anyone in this House having any sight or any knowledge. And we need a clear commitment from the Minister that when he winds up today, what these measures will be, or what he'd like to rule out on the floor of the House, that any further concessions will be made to the government of Mauritius. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill, it's 6 shameful clauses, and the treaty it partially implements are a damning indictment on the failures of this Labour government. It surrenders sovereignty of a land we own to a foreign government, increasingly allied and growing closer to countries that are not our allies and pose the biggest threats to our national security and defence. It binds the hands of British taxpayers into paying £35 billion, a surrender tax, It puts the interests and demands of a foreign country and left-wing lawyers above our national interests. It leaves our country poorer, weaker and less able to defend our interests from foreign threats. Undermines our standing in the world. Labour's Chagos surrender deal is an epic failure of diplomacy and an expensive humiliation for Britain. And when Labour negotiates, Britain does lose. But this side of the House and His Majesty's loyal opposition will continue to stand up for Britain's national interests and our defence and security. We will fight for our sovereignty, we will defend British taxpayers by opposing Labour's surrender tax, and we'll make the case for the British Chagossians to have their rights safeguarded and the marine protected area preserved. And we will oppose this bill and fight this treaty every step of the way.